Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you today.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. Happy Monday.
Oh, it's Monday already?
It is indeed. Our weekend is gone.
I wonder if there's anything new came up over the weekend. The only thing is, if it changed, that would be new, but if it's always trashy, then somebody's starting a war here. Now it looks like there may be internal wars, border wars, and real wars.
Yeah.
And we were talking a minute ago and said, usually there's somebody at the tail end of all that who's getting some money.
Yeah.
War for money, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, it has to be camouflaged for it, so that the people realize that this is all for good sakes. And, I was so shooken up about Liz Cheney. I mean, she's been doing quite well for herself. But anyway, she's gotten caught and maybe messing around with the records, but we'll have to wait and see. We'll have the FBI check into it
I'm sure they will.
and tell us what the real truth is. But I want to start off with what's going on in the Middle East. We've talked about it, but it seems like it's coming to a climax. I don't know if that's right, but it's been climactic for so many years anyway. But Netanyahu says he will ignore Biden's red line. Biden is the boss.
Yeah.
He runs the equipment. He runs the money. And if he doesn't, we don't do. If Israel doesn't do what we want, he's going to be in big trouble.
Yeah.
Which is a bunch of baloney. I don't think he'd do anything. But I think they're in a dilemma. I think they both of them sort of have both sides. They have to satisfy everybody. Netanyahu's in the middle. The Democratic Party's in the middle, and their party is split, and that it's split for a decent reason, but it's not the right reason. That is that it's factional, one faction against another. It isn't like, should we be there or should we stay out of the internal affairs of all these border wars around the world? That subject really never comes up. And it is something that could get out of hand because Netanyahu is becoming more aggressive. I've seen more negative stuff in our press than I've ever seen before.
That's true.
And yet, the Israeli people might be a little bit nervous, but they're not saying they want to be tough. And that's why they'll probably just stick with him. They're not going to put him out of office now. But it's absolutely amazing to me of our various so-called allies and friends that they're the benefactors of all that we do, and then they come, whether it's Ukraine or Israel, anybody. They're the boss.
Yeah.
They come in and tell us what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, the borders and everything else, somebody else is going to tell us what to do. And I think that's why this interventionist system that we've been dealing with for years, the planning and the foreign policy and all, I think it's coming to a climax because it's not workable.
Yeah.
And, finally the Soviet system decided it wasn't workable. And I think a lot of people had hoped during the Cold War that there would be a different system. It's in between, but I argued about the in-between system because you have to give up any decent part of each side and you end up with a mess. And that's what we have here. We have internal fighting over the special interest because we designed a system that's what we do. We divvy up the loot, and then the loot is always used to buy the Congress. And then they call that, well, we're for democracy, and it's the opposite of democracy. So I think it's a philosophic tragedy. But I think they all use lying and innuendos and pretense to make the people feel decent about it. But sometimes all this intervention, like COVID, the government had to be involved to save the country from this endemic. And yet it turned out that the people finally had to wake up. But our point, at least my point, is that we want to wake up people before they make another tragic mistake. And the tragic mistakes in the Middle East have already been made, just as they've been made in Ukraine, in the Middle East, the whole works. We're deep in trouble because we're entrenched, and there's no way for the people who are in charge to walk away from it because that's what we need to do.
Yeah, and you make a good point about the media really starting to carry negative press on Netanyahu. And the reason is because the media being completely, the mainstream media being completely in favor of Biden, they're seeing how the policy is hurting Biden's reelection chances, and they're desperately trying to frame it in a way that will save Biden. And you're right, it does. It makes us look weak. Ironically, the neocons always say we look weak if we don't go in full force. But in fact, we look weak when we go in, and there's no winning strategy. There's no way to win. And put this next one up because this is, Biden knows he's in trouble. He knows that his numbers are down because of his inability to handle what's going on in Gaza. So here's from our friends at antiwar.com. Netanyahu will ignore Biden's red line and move forward to attack Rafah. This is on the border of Egypt. Basically what Israel said to the Palestinians is, hey, you guys got to all move south because we're going to attack the entire north of the country. They didn't want to do it, but they said, okay, they went down to the south. They're all there, congregated there, and they say, hey, well, we want to attack the south too. So you guys, sorry, we're just going to have to kill you. And so Biden knows this is going to be like probably the death blow to his campaign as well. And so he's playing the tough guy. Hey, Netanyahu, don't do this, don't do this. Netanyahu just laughs. But you know why he laughs at Biden? Put up this next clip. This is why he laughs, because he can. Biden told the MSNBC if Israel attacked Gaza's southern city of Rafah, it would cross a red line for Washington. But nonetheless, added that he would also supply weapons to Israel. So he basically put out a red line, but said, well, if you guys don't do what we say, we'll still give you weapons and money.
Well, what about the balance of how he's treating the Palestinians? Are we for him or against him? Well, we were against him because we were for Israel. But all of a sudden they found out some Americans didn't like being for one side versus the other. So they're doing this. And so we have two policies. We don't have one policy. We have one policy of interventionism, which is arbitrary and do whatever they want. But the one thing is, probably on the same day that we bomb or pay for all the bombs and participate in the bombing and the destruction of Gaza, the people are getting food handed to them. So the more we kill and are responsible for the killing and the bombing, the more we have to do something else. We have two sides in America. We have to satisfy both sides. But they never put the American person, the people, the individuals, the citizens of the country in protecting our safety and our liberties and our rule of law. No, that is way down on the list.
Yeah, it's just incredible. I don't know that I've ever seen an administration so terrified, so cowed, so impotent in the face of this crisis. And I think as non-interventionists, we would argue that Biden probably shouldn't tell Netanyahu what to do, but he should also tell him you can't have any more weapons. We didn't talk about it last week, but there's a threshold for a military transport that it must be reported to Congress. And so what Biden did so that he could get those weapons to Israel in the amount that they requested is he just did 100 smaller shipments, missiles and missiles and missiles. So he's completely all in for it. He's impotent in getting it to stop, and it's causing him. Let's do this next, and this is actually from the same article. So recently, the Biden administration attempted to split Netanyahu's policies from the overall sentiments of the Israeli people. During his MSNBC interviews, Biden charged that Netanyahu was harming Israel. Netanyahu rebuked Biden, claiming his policies were widely accepted by Israelis. And here's Netanyahu's quote, "The positions that I espouse are supported by the overwhelming majority of Israelis who say to you after October 7th, he said. So essentially, he's right. The Israeli sentiment is in favor of this continuing war. And so Netanyahu, of course, is facing possible prison. So he doesn't want the war to go over either, because when the war's ended, people are going to look around and say, this is the guy who was corruption, et cetera, et cetera.
Television claims it's military action or a defensive response to Hamas attack on October 7th. We'll go there. We're not going to leave. I have a red line, that threat there. But so what should our answer be? Because these people are going to be fighting, they have been, and they don't make much progress. Why couldn't they say, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
go ahead if that's what you have to do. And there's been times when Israel did some things for their true defense when they thought for their survival they could do it. And I wasn't strongly critical of them saying they were creating the war. This is a little bit different than Israel, securing their borders. But this is something that has been going on, and it's not new. It's not different. It's part of human nature, but it's part of governments that get involved and that want to be everything to everybody. And the people who they really pay attention to are the people who have money. Then both sides get money, and then both sides have factions. And then the last thing you have is a true republic. You have the fight for who's going to run the dictatorship of the majority, and then and for that reason, it's natural that they'll be involved in elections. To make sure these factions are taken care of, and they want to change all the rules. So, and it's been progressing. The place where we've been more optimistic, there are more people waking up, more people are concerned. They stood up to COVID, and the knowledge is there, except the enemy is so powerful and monolithic when you look at so much of the control of the economy and the control of the media, especially social media. That is very, very powerful. The institutions of learning, they've been preaching all this stuff too. That's why, even if we could turn a switch off, it probably takes a generation, because we've had a couple generations, that have graduated with nothing but this nonsense pumped into their brain. And so it's going to take it. But most people think, we'll have to have a civil war or something like that. We don't have to. We have to have a contest with ideas. And if our ideas are superior, they should reign, as long as we get that message to the people.
Yeah, it should never have devolved into this. The U.S. is so deeply involved, providing all the weapons, providing all the misery. Well, here's something that came out in the speech. Now, first, let's set it up, because this happened late last week. So there's the October 7th. What happened? The Hamas military attack on Israel. We know that a lot of what was said initially was not true. The amount of people that were killed, the fact that the Israelis themselves killed a lot of people in this attack, and all the rape stories have now been refuted. But there was something that did happen, and obviously, Israel would respond. However, you're seeing the myth of October 7th fueling the retaliation, where you have, even if it was 1,200 Israelis killed, terrible. Shouldn't have happened if they were all civilians. But nevertheless, you can't kill 30,000 civilians on the other side. It's so wildly disproportionate, and we're supporting it. So here's what happened. They're starving to death there. People are dying of hunger. There's a 10-year-old boy famously died at the end of the week. And so what do they get? This brainiac idea, we talked about it before, let's drop 30,000 meals to feed 2 million starving people. So they dropped from parachutes a bunch of meals, and they killed a bunch of Palestinians with the stupid meals. The airdrop to Gaza kills 5 Palestinians after the parachutes fail. Can you imagine running out to get food after starving? Golly. The parachute breaks and kills you. So what does Biden come up with? He says, well, I got a great idea. He said it in his State of the Union. We're going to build a pier. We're going to build a temporary port in Gaza to deliver the aid, because killing people with food meals is probably not a great idea. So what does that mean? Put this next one up. This is Military Times. That means you're going to deploy 1,000 U.S. troops. The Military Times reports on Friday, 1,000 U.S. troops deployed to build offshore port for Gaza aid. Now, Biden said no troops on the ground. I guess they'll just be standing on that port trying to build it. The question being, well, hang on a minute. We give Israel all these bombs. We give them all the money. And then we want to bring some food into starving people. They say no. And we say, okay, we don't want to bother you. So we're going to build this port. But the clincher on this one is, and this is Kyle Anzalone from the Libertarian Institute, as he tweeted a couple of days ago, or yesterday, the Biden's Gaza seaport will take months to establish. So this is basically a jobs program for the military. If you are starving today, you're not going to be better off in months when they have this thing built.
The authoritarians might not plan every detail, but when a detail pops up and there's an opening for them, they jump in and make use of it to try to promote their cause. But I think one thing that a lot of people get disgusted with is the obsession and the absolute refusal. We don't want to talk to anybody. We are done talking, and we're going to fight till the last person that we need to kill. I think that is even if they were fibbing a little, you'd think this doesn't make any sense. But they're telling the truth, and of course, I think that solidifies the fact that there is going to be no peace there, and at the rate we're going. And I guess that it'll happen when both sides run out of ammunition. But as long as we support one side and pretend we support the other side, there's going to be a lot of ammunition for a long time.
Yeah.
And there will be a side that's victorious, but the resentment will just increase.
Yeah.
There's liable to be more enemies on the side of the Palestinians as time goes on. If they get wiped off all their territory, and of course it's been the settlements that's been the sore spot anyway, and now we can settle any place we went in the whole Middle East. Palestine is dead, dead and gone, and that's going to stir up some people who have been very neutral. And of course, when it talks about where you should go and what you should do, in many ways the libertarian is very neutral. If there are two people fighting, to pretend that we know which one happened, which one are the good guys, what we do is we end up sending stuff to both sides. So it makes no sense, and that's why a bankruptcy, maybe some good could come from it, but right now all we're doing is consuming wealth and destroying the freedom of. I talk a lot about the freedoms in this country, but I think it's going to be the freedoms much more diverse than that. It's going to be anybody involved. I mean, the people in the Middle East, they don't have much freedom now. How about Ukraine? The people who didn't want to take on Russia or something like that. They are destined to have lost so much, and it continues. So, war is not a good idea. And the people who promote it are doing it for very, very self reasons, not for building a republic and promoting individual liberty.
Yeah, well, the next boneheaded thing that we want to talk about today is this brilliant idea to ban a social media platform. Put the next one on. This might happen this week. Biden agrees to sign bill that could ban TikTok if Congress passes it. And you have to pinch yourself and sit here and think, are we real? They can't pass the budget. They can barely keep the government operating. They can't get anything done, but they can grandstand and say, we've got to ban TikTok. Now, TikTok, I've seen some videos. I don't go there. I'm not a 20-something-year-old girl or boy or whatever. But young people like it. They make short videos. A lot of them do goofy things, outlandish things. Probably some of them do inappropriate, improper things. Nevertheless, it is just a platform, like everything else, for people to put videos up. Well, there happens to be some Chinese investment in it, so you've got all of the China people in government now wanting to ban it and prevent Americans from using a social media platform that they enjoy using. So they're going to claim some great victory for America by banning this.
Yeah, what's going on here is a political tool to try to set trade. And who wants to trade? The people who think they can make more money. In the 60s, it was automobiles. We couldn't stand the fact that automobiles were coming in. And, that they did that. We eventually started making better cars because some of those people came over here or sent us the parts, and the whole system changed. But this is a political tool that they use, and the whole thing is they don't ask the question, who does this favor? What are they going to say? Well, if we don't have to deal with the TikTok competition, that's going to help American companies. And both parties, unfortunately, are more supportive of that attitude than I remember, because I think there was a good many years that didn't come up very much in presidential elections, and it always was talked about. But people have to realize that when you interfere with trade, it's a civil liberty. It's telling you and me, where we have to buy our cars or do something else. We lose that choice. And we as individuals should be able to make these choices. But when the bureaucrats and the politicians and the special interests, the moneyed interests, will write the rules and make it sound like we're protecting you. But they're not. There's always a cost to the people they're claiming they're protecting, and there's always a injury to them too. There's no real benefit long term, but it's so seductive. Just keep the competition on. But to me, the saddest part here is some people would say, "Why? Let's assume that China isn't anywhere as bad as they're said to be, but not ready to take over the world either." So they're saying, "Well, we'll just do this," but we shouldn't have to be crybabies about it. Say, "Oh, we can't compete." Well, there must be a way to compete. I don't understand computers, but for a long time I didn't worry as much as maybe I should have. But there's competition now for the mainstream media. The distribution of information now, from my viewpoint, looks like it's improved. It hasn't diminished. There's more of that. So why worry about that? To compete with them or do something else.
Yeah, I was talking to Eric Garris of antiwar.com this morning, and we're texting, and we talked a little bit about the TikTok situation. First of all, it's an immensely popular social media platform, immensely popular. And he said he actually knows some people that have very popular economics channels. So they teach Austrian economics on TikTok. They go to where the kids are, the young people are, and they do something very useful. He said there's a lot of very good foreign policy TikTok channels as well. So basically the U.S. government butting in and banning it is going to silence all of these people. It's against the First Amendment.
Instead of banning it, maybe it's easier for both sides to use it.
Yeah.
But that's too much for them to comprehend for a lot of people.
Well,
but it is. I just want to emphasize again, unfortunately, there's a bipartisan support. If you see a vote in the Congress, it's not going to be all Democrats or all Republicans that vote for that.
That's true. Well, here's the argument, and this is from Kyle's article on antiwar.com, if you put that next one on. So a number of U.S. agencies, including the FBI and the FCC, have sounded alarms about the alleged risks posed by TikTok, warning that sensitive user data could be shared with the Chinese government. Well, I did like 3 seconds of Googling and put on the next one. So they're afraid this data is going to be taken by the Chinese government. Well, here's an article just 2 months ago. U.S. National Security Agency buys web browsing data without warrant. So our government is literally doing, i.e. stealing our data, exactly what they accuse the Chinese government of doing.
That's what they ought to be concentrating on, is our government stealing. We have the responsibility to do it, and it's probably a much greater danger than China worrying about it. But once they get built up and hatred built into the system, but I think it starts with an ego. They don't want the competition, but it's also the fact that they want the business. They don't want any competition. They want it put out on a platter. And too often, probably throughout history, there have always been favors, but it's been worse since we gave up on the view of free markets and free trade and gone to something that is much softer. We're not communists, we're not fascists, we're not into control, and we're not going to do that, and we're not anarchists. We don't want anybody regulate anything. Instead, allow the rules of the free market regulate anything. That's one thing. The rules of the free market can be tougher even than what the government does, because you can't get away with fraud. The government participates in the fraud. So it's a messy system.
All the projectionism of, well, that evil Chinese communist government, they ban everything that they feel threatening. Well, this is exactly what our government's doing. The exact same thing. Well, anyway, we'll call to a close this week for today's show. I'm going to ask if we can put on that bonus clip. I just want to mention to people, you probably, like me, you're watching Bitcoin, you're thinking, wow, it's really interesting what's finally happening here. People are terrified. The dollar, obviously they're voting. Dr. Paul would know much better than I would about this, but people are worried about the dollar status, and so we see gold and Bitcoin going through the roof. Well, the good thing about that is if you're holding some Bitcoin and you're seeing it go through the roof, you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Ron Paul Institute. There's a QR code right there. We will take your Bitcoin very happily and gratefully, and you'll make a huge impact now that Bitcoin is so high. So make the donation while it's high, get the maximum benefit from your taxes because we are a nonprofit, and help us continue to spread the Ron Paul message of peace and prosperity. And we definitely thank you for your continued support.
Very good. And we can't exist without listeners. We don't have a ton of money, but we do get adequate funding. But we can always do a better job if we are able to get some funds from people who support us. But more to our liking would be to get a few more listeners. And there are some things that we have in the middle that we're thinking about and making good use of the internet, where we can expand, our platform, expand our outreach. And a lot of people have asked, boy, you guys have a great program. Why don't you have huge numbers? Well, it's partially our fault, maybe, by not promoting it the right way. So we need to do it, but we want the quality, and we want the goals, and we want people to understand what we're doing, and we want to get people to realize if they come here, we're going to give our honest opinion and our work the hardest to present the truth to the people. And we do thank you very much for supporting us, because we do have a lot of support, and sometimes the support is out there that we never get to know about and never get to adequate thank everybody for doing it. So I now thank you for all your support and encouragement on what we're doing. And please return to the Liberty Report soon.